Hi, Skye Taylor, and I'm here from Ardoc. I'm the Programs Coordinator in New South Wales. I'm here with Lachlan Preston, who's a manager, volunteer team manager here in Melbourne. So I just wanted to introduce you to Ardoc, and I have to get organised with my glasses, unfortunately. So we're an education charity, and we focus on improving educational outcomes for children and young people facing disadvantage. Some people may have heard of us, I'm not sure. Anybody? Yeah, some nods, that's great to hear. So because I'm from Sydney, nobody's heard of us in Sydney. I'm the only person that works in Sydney, and we're building our profile, so I always feel like I have to explain things maybe more than I need to. But as you can see, our mission is that we believe that every child's potential should be realised through full participation in education, and that belief inspires us to enhance learning outcomes with education volunteers and provide programs for schools. So in 2020 we mobilised 855 volunteers, and that's 2020, so COVID has already started, and I actually couldn't find the data from pre-COVID, but it was a lot more. So we have a big range of volunteers. We have education volunteers who go into classrooms once a week to help with reading groups or literacy support, and we have workplace volunteers who we have a number of programs they're involved in. Some of them are on a regular basis over a year, and some of them are one-off events, but we have a big range of volunteers that we participate with. So our journey to get a CRM began before I started at Ardoc, and I've been with Ardoc for almost 2.5 years, but the need was very real. We had a lot of spreadsheets, and it's interesting to hear Donate Life talk about spreadsheets. We had spreadsheets that did things and spreadsheets that didn't do things, spreadsheets that were locked and spreadsheets that weren't. It took me a good few months to get my head around all the spreadsheets when I first started working. And because of the range of programs we offer, there was a big range of spreadsheets to deal with that. So having data, and especially for managers reporting on data, it was incredibly difficult. So talk of a CRM, I believe, had been around for a few years before 2.5 years. So that's where we were going from spreadsheets to our first ever CRM. Reporting and monitoring of programs was really difficult, and everything, all the screening of our volunteers was also manually entered into spreadsheets. So there was, I suppose, room for error and room for missing things, and a lot more conversations between people of, have you put that information in, and is that really right, and have you updated things? So we're finding already that things are more efficient, which is what we want. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to talk you through an Ardoc volunteer application and how we've set up, or how SalesFixers help us set up Salesforce to do our volunteer application process, and then I'll hand over to Lachlan, who will talk a bit more about some other parts that we've done. So when our volunteers would like to volunteer with us, they go to our homepage, and right up the top here we have a volunteer button here, and they can go through to apply. We have two kinds of volunteers. As I talked about, the education volunteers that go into schools regularly, so they have a higher standard of compliance. And then we have a standard compliance volunteer, which are our volunteers that help out on a one-off event or only in supervised workplace events. So I've applied as an education volunteer here. I just made up Ardi Volley, who's an individual. And so it comes in through our leads. So access to these leads, there's 3 or 4 people in Lachlan's team that have, no, more than that, 4 or 5 people who have access to this queue of new volunteers who then need to be converted into a contact. So I'm just going to talk you through a little bit about that. So we've got no duplicates, which is always good to see. And then we have all our personal details, contact details, and the volunteer application details. So some of these questions, in creating the form that feeds into this lead and then feeds into our contact record, we had to think a little bit more about what questions we were asking in the application process. So that was really useful to help us really think about why we were asking questions and what questions we were going to record information about. So further down here we have the demographic ones, I think, are at the bottom here. Yeah, so these in particular, as a team, we took quite a lot of time working out why we needed to record or why we should be recording if people have a disability or need extra support as a volunteer. Also, the main languages that they might speak and if they were prepared to use those in a classroom if required. So it really helped kind of highlight to us, why are we asking these questions? Why are we doing this volunteer application form? What is it we want to know about our volunteers to help us train them better and screen them better and then place them in schools that are best suited to their skill set. So I will convert Professor Ardy Volley over now, and then I will show you some of the great ways we can now sort our information about our volunteers to keep track of the screening and training of them. So our Volley household is created. So when I go into my contacts, so some of this might be new for people who haven't used Salesforce before, and some of you might find this very boring, I'm sorry. But this is, for us, this was the most, the biggest change that we've seen from having Salesforce and from having SalesFix help us build this. So here we can see we have created a lot of fake contacts, all our Ardy contacts, which is our nickname for our CRM. So Ardy Volley, who I just created now, we can go in, and this is where we're able to see all our related information for the volunteer. I click on that properly. And one thing I wanted to talk about a little bit more. So here we have the application form. So the application form is saved on the contact. So if we're ever unclear about anything, we can go back and see exactly what the volunteer said. We can see that it was created by me. And we can go down here to compliance. So compliances for Ardoc are a really important component of our screening and training. We require all our volunteers, of course, to have a working with children check because they're working with children in schools, and also a national police check. So keeping track of those, who sent us all their information, who hasn't, who's applied, who's been cleared, who hasn't. This was all done manually in a spreadsheet. Now it's really wonderful that we have this system because we can see now what type of check, what type of compliance check we're doing, the working with children check, police check. We're also keeping track of COVID vaccination, or we plan to, and then the police check as well. And we can see if they've been cleared, suspended or barred. So when it's a working with children check, we attach the working with children check here. So then any of our staff can go in and check their working with children check and provide that to a school if they require it. Lots of our schools want to have a copy of the working with children check. The police one we don't store here. That is just the status of the police check is shown. Actually, yeah. And so then also all our learning plans and learning assignments are added onto there as well. So when I'm looking now, I can have a look at our screening and training. I can see my volunteers, who's completed an interview, who's done their training, who we've got police checks for, reference checks, etc. So this enables us to have a wonderful overview of which volunteers we need to be calling again to get them to send their details in, or which volunteers are ready to be passed on to the staff member that will place them at a school. I think that's pretty much, the only other thing, sorry, one more point was when I was talking to my colleague Jean, who uses this every day, and as you can tell, I don't use it every day, but I've been quite involved in the process. She said that she had organised for herself. She uses Chatter just to keep track of the day-to-day updates, and then she uses Notes for future reference points, so things that someone might need to know if she left the organisation. So that's something internally that was decided within her team. So now I'm going to hand over to Lachlan to continue.
So like with the first presentation as well, we've also set up a community, except for with ours, this is for our volunteers. So in terms of doing things like their training, also updating their contact details, and some other pieces, and for us, logging their volunteer hours. What we thought we'd do today also is just give you a little bit of a look inside. One thing that we found a bit challenging when we were starting out was actually finding good examples of what a volunteer community looked like. And certainly, you know, there's example videos, but throughout the whole process, often the examples are, you know, created by companies that have a far larger budget than what we have and are dealing on a far greater size. So trying to find kind of realistic examples, you know, that aren't totally customized or built by huge IT teams. So for our volunteers, up here you can see there's also a login button, which is where our volunteers are able to log in. And for these volunteers, once they are into our system, we enable them and they get automatically emailed a login to the community where they can access. So I'll just zoom out slightly so we can see this. So this is a view inside our community, and this is what greets the volunteers when they log in. So for a new volunteer coming in, the first thing that they're going to be, or that we're asking them to focus on, is their learning. So we're using a platform called Opinion for Learning. It was kind of previously called LearnTrack, and should be still. Hang on a sec. Just make sure it keeps loading there. And so as the volunteer clicks into their learning, they can see the learning plans or the modules essentially that we've assigned to them. This user, because it's a demo user, has been assigned 11 training plans. That's certainly not the expectation for all of our volunteers. But they can see here, and they can see you know, whether they've completed it or not, when they did it, and so on, and a little description. We're still working out some of the real specifics of the Opinion stuff. So this is probably the piece that is the least developed. On the left here, you can see the achievements, so you can see whether they've that they get a little a sticker, basically, confirming the modules that have been completed. And you can see here there's a module that's incomplete as well. And for a volunteer to complete the module, they simply click into it, get a little bit of an overview, and then click through into the activities. And so from here, one of the things we're hoping to cut down a little bit is the amount of clicks that it takes people to actually get into here, that we're still working through. But you can see here, you know, this is the content that the person can kind of go through on this particular topic of child safety, and then it will click through and into a quiz. So we've built it with sections of content and then quizzes, and this one has already completed the quiz, but the volunteers will go through that. And we're able to set up the quizzes so that people have to achieve 100% compliance, and they have to, you know, redo it until they have completed that. The second, and we also have, this part is even less built at the moment, but there will be an ability here to also book into optional events as well. So training courses, we do a lot of professional development sessions for our education volunteers. And so this calendar here they'll be able to register. And it's actually integrated with Zoom as well, so that the registration kind of goes back and forth between the two. The second key area for us is around recording volunteer hours. So Ardoc has been using a separate platform called Track It Forward for about 5 years for volunteers to actually record their hours. And one of the things that we're excited about is kind of bringing all of these separate things into one place. So for the volunteer hours, you can see here they can also access it from the home menu, clicking here to log their hours, and they can select the projects that they are assigned to. So this person's assigned to 4 projects. The majority of our volunteers will probably be only working on 1 project, and so they can simply select their project, put in the hours that they worked and any comments and so on, and save the hours. And it also enables us to pull up some summaries and things for the volunteer. So we can see here a view of their hours over the different calendar years and a summary of the total hours that this particular volunteer has done. they've had a very busy start to 2022. And also they can go in and actually see all of the previous hours that they have logged as well, which is really good from the kind of transparency side and volunteers being able to see what they've done. And the third thing that we're excited about here also is in terms of being able to see their profile. So in terms of being able to, for example, update their phone number or email address, adding in medical or dietary requirements, this sort of thing, so that volunteers are able, emergency contacts, they're able to come in. And there's some things, for example, where the volunteer can see information but not edit it, and some things such as when they first volunteered or how many hours they've done and so on, and a view of how they're going through the compliance stages, and then there's other bits that they that they can edit as well. And that days and time available is a really important point, because that's something that often changes with our volunteers, especially if they're students from semester to semester. So not having to write an email and then us record it somewhere, they can just go straight in and do it themselves. Yeah, exactly. And so we can just save it, and then we can see that the details are updated. So I think that's the main sections through that. Yep, that's the end of our demos. Yeah. Oh, sorry. So, and maybe just one other thing. Yeah. So there is a lot of additional functionality that we can add into the community. So in terms of help resources, being able to have discussion and so on. But we deliberately at this stage chose to have a relatively smaller version of the community to get it up and going. And kind of similar to the Donate Life, the talk of enhancement basically, as we get people in there and using the system, working out what it will be. So one of the advantages for us of having decided on the community as a platform is there potentially are other ways to do the scale of what we're doing now. But if we did that, then we wouldn't be able to do some of the other functionality that community also has that we're not using now, but hopefully we will be able to do in the future. Yep, for sure. Skye? I'm just going to sit down if that's okay. I don't need to be up there anymore. So I was just going to talk about a few of our successes from the implementation. So I think the goodwill and enthusiasm have got us a long way. As I said before, we were using multiple spreadsheets. People were very frustrated with that. So each and every staff member was ready for a new CRM. And each and every staff member saw the benefit in having all our data in one place and easily accessible. And our volunteers as well. I was speaking to a volunteer last week who also was very excited not to have to go to multiple places to do their child safety refresher at the beginning of the year and log their hours at a different spot. They now can just go to one portal and everything's there. The community's working really well for them. User stories were created early on, and even though a lot of us didn't really know what we needed or what we could have with a CRM. So looking back at some of the user stories, it's a little bit like, oh, did we think we could do that? Or, oh, that's just a list view, that's really easy. The fact that everyone was consulted on that was really important, because it means now everyone has a vested interest, I think. So that was one thing that worked really well. And it made the staff members feel included along the way. I was part of the steering committee. I am not in the management team, but I was invited to be part of the steering committee. So there was an end user who was involved in that steering committee, and I think that was really important. It helped, I think it was Mel who was talking about the language of Salesforce and learning all that. So I was able to kind of translate a lot of that as we went along to my team members to say, oh, well, an opportunity. Because for us as well, sales is not what we do. And Salesforce sounded like, why are we using a sales tool? We're a not-for-profit, we do education programs, we're a charity. But be able to translate then an opportunity was just our partnership agreement. That was what we signed with our schools to ask for them a contribution that goes towards the programs that they receive. So that was really important, and it was successful to have that. It was also, we've had some changes in the management team, so it's good to have
are the people involved from at least from the middle through to the implementation now. And I think that it was important for me to be part of it. Immediately after go live and for a number of weeks, we had daily check-in sessions that we called Ask Ardy, and that was kind of, I think it was January. So we're all working from home, and we're all quite happy to see each other's faces for a half-hour session, but also were able to kind of informally go through some of the things that we were learning or problem solving or things we were struggling with, and that was a great success. And that was a great part of a change management tool as well, because it enabled us to think about our work processes a bit. A lot of our processes work from January to December as we work with the school year. So we're always thinking in January, how are we going to make this easier for our volunteers or for our schools or for our workplace volunteers? So it was a really good timing in that regard. Yeah.
And so I guess just finally, to share a couple of lessons. Like Skye said, we're really early in this stage, and neither of us were in the kind of strategic decision of implementing the CRM. But there are still some lessons that we can kind of talk to. So the first one was a little bit around the discovery and the selection of things. For various reasons, we did have lots of new staff at the start of last year, particularly coming out of the 2020 COVID. And we had quite an inexperienced staff base in terms of using CRMs as well, which did make some of the discovery stuff a little bit challenging, because there was people who either didn't know the Ardoc processes or people who found it hard to think about what a CRM could do if they'd only ever used email and Excel spreadsheets and that sort of thing. I think which was a good idea was we kind of did the discovery phase, and then as a piece of work that was approved by the board, and then from there took another business case back to the board basically for the whole piece. One of the, I guess a small thing that I think would be good to consider even more is it did mean there was quite a lot of time pressure on deciding the actual applications, the external apps that would do certain things. And so I think a lesson for future would be a deeper look into those things, including a broader scope of the team. And to what I was saying earlier, it was sometimes hard to see kind of good demonstrations. There's videos, the kind of glossy promo that they want you to see, but like one of the ones that I did look at, for example, looked amazing until we realized they have essentially 2 pay points, and half the features you only get on the higher pay point, which was like triple the price of a comparative product we were looking at. And then when we compared the two that were actually at the same pay point, the other one that seemed to have less features actually had way more because everything was included at that pay point. So I think that look of the potential external apps and so on is a really important part. And that probably has been the most challenging part of the integration for us. So we're using Opinium, which we were talking about there, also Experience Cloud, and we're also using kind of like an Asana equivalent native to Salesforce called Inspire Planner, which is the task planning one. And we're using that for our program management, essentially. But with the Inspire Planner and Opinium, one of the things that we realized is there was quite a lot of training and support available from those companies, but we didn't really find out about it until January and February when we were already essentially going live. And now we're re-engaging with Opinium to get more support from them directly. So I think one of the things to consider also is just the work in terms of setting up some of those things. They're all native to Salesforce, but there's still actually a lot of work to kind of customize them and make sure that they are fitting, and probably engaging a little bit more directly with those external organizations a bit earlier would have been really good, and perhaps training up our team. And I think there's a balance in that, like the first group was saying maybe some of their training was a bit early, and for us some of the engagement from these externals was a little bit too late, and so probably somewhere in the middle. And that might be something that you need to consider in terms of project budgets as well, is support maybe not only from your sales fix or equivalent who's doing it, but with some of these products that also may not be being used that often by sales fix if they're slightly unique solutions or so on, whether you need to also get specific support from them. And then the third thing for us is the jump from, we had a project manager who was very highly skilled and did a really excellent job, but she has now gone to another job implementing CRMs, and that move into the business as usual. It's been very challenging to get a Salesforce administrator at the moment, and the gap between someone who is probably far too skilled for the work that we need done at the moment, and our team, which has very little, has good user knowledge but not admin knowledge, and to a certain degree, even just somebody who's coming in as an entry-level admin, we actually need an intermediate support, because our staff are still learning how to do it. They don't know what they don't know, and we need support that's a bit more hands-on and kind of holding people through this first 6 months while they're learning the stuff and integrating. That's been something I think that would be worth considering as well if you're doing a similar project as well. Yeah, that's our experience here and our lessons. We'd be happy to take any questions.
Just looking at the volunteer system, what's your CRM for your development program? So your fundraising program, is it Salesforce?
We're using Fundraising,
which is an app inside Salesforce. Neither of us know much.
Fundraising is similar to Paisley, front end, it's similar to your setup, integrated into Salesforce using Mobilise.
Okay, so if you look at the holistic picture of a volunteer, donor, etc., is there anywhere in this build that someone in your organisation can see the true picture of let's say, Ardy Volley? They know that they're a donor.
On their contact.
Yeah, so in the community, it won't be so much, but if we go into...
There's probably
an individual volunteer, we've got the volunteer info tab, which is where Skye and I live, which has all the kinds of information and stuff that we need about volunteering. But then there's also a donor info tab, which, to be honest, I have never even looked in. But it's the people in our team who are involved in it definitely
don't tell Kim now.
But yes,
our
so you
fundraising
can
manager.
so you can still see here of the various informations and stuff about.
So you can build that full profile if you need to.
It's so against the contact in Salesforce, their donor information is also there. So with the community, if somebody's doing their training, that training flows back into Salesforce and is linked. So you can see here on the right hand side here. So this is the stuff, the modules that they're assigned to, and that information is coming back into Salesforce and being stored on the contact record here. So it's still all on the one contact. And it could be you can surface that information in the community if you want. At the moment, we've focused the community just on the volunteers, so we're not putting the donation stuff front and center. But if it could be opened up to donors in the future as well, if there was a use for it. Yeah.
That community you got set up, it just looks so great. I love the colours and the branding. Did you find that sort of design part of it tricky to implement?
Do you want me to talk?
Yeah, because it was you in my art, wasn't it?
So when we first opened the community, as it was kind of functionally built, it definitely didn't look like this. It looked, so that was the first thing that I was this is the thing that people will see when they first log in. And so we actually have a person who does some graphic design work for us. It's actually not that complicated. It's a header, a banner, and then the button icons. And so the menus are relatively easy to change as long as you've got admin permissions and stuff. There was stuff in terms of setting up the actual pieces that are in there is quite complicated, and we weren't involved in. But the actual, the ability to change the images and do that, you can change the font colors and these orange colors and the header color and so on. And then you can basically dump in whatever images you want to customize it. So yeah, that was something that I was really keen to get done quickly, because it does give a very different view than what people first saw. Yeah, it wasn't that hard, as long as you've got someone who can do the design stuff. That was the tricky bit.
I think we need to get yours on the Salesforce list of communities. I think that's great.
Thank you.
I think we've got time for one more question.
Salesforce a lot lately. Are you using volunteers for Salesforce with guest user access, or do people, your volunteers still have user licenses? How does it work?
I don't know.
Ask the builder.
I'm a salesperson. They use the volunteers for Salesforce, and that actually had an impact on the community licensing that was needed. So, yes, the answer is yes, they use the volunteers for Salesforce, and a particular version of community licensing, like I think experience plus or whatever.
And are you the salesperson?
But, who delivered Ardoc? Nobody from our team that delivered Ardoc is here today. But you can download more info from this QR code and reach out to us. Thank you.
Looks amazing. Well done.
Thank you.